Nicodemus. Okay, this is GunFunZS, and I'm going to talk to you about Shotshell reloading. I assume you've seen the title, but let's talk about what you usually think of. Generally, you think of a single stage press, perhaps somewhat like this, perhaps one made by Mech or Lee. This one is a Bear, and it is very similar to a old Hornady Pacific. There's some history there, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Perhaps you're thinking of a progressive shotshell press. And if you are, don't think of this one. This is a very old Mech progressive, and it is kind of a hassle. Still nice to have, but you should get a better one. But perhaps all of that is way too complicated for you, and you're thinking of something like this. This is a Lee loader. You operate it with a hammer, not included. It comes in a kind of chintzy cardboard box, and they're becoming a little bit of a collector's item. This one happens to be for $4.10, and you can see it comes with a number of scoops and a couple metal tubes and a punch to knock out the primer and a crimp starter and a little rod to push with your hand for seating the new primer. And it's in, like I said, kind of a chintzy box. These have their following. They're based in an older era when the assumption was you only use shot shells really for trap. And they're easy to lose the pieces to. They don't size the rim of the brass, which I find problematic because sometimes that matters and sometimes it doesn't, and who wants ammo that only works sometimes? And then we come to the subject of this video. This is a slick little kit from the Reloaders Network. James, also known as Loads of Bacon, designed this, and he's been developing it over the last year or so. Fortune Cookie was one of the other beta testers. You may have seen his video, but I'd like you to note just how clean and tidy the packaging is. It's all this 3D printed casing, and everything you need other than the hammer and a cup for your powder and the components fits in this nice little box. So, let's see what's in here. It's gone through a few iterations, and you can actually fit in some extras. He used to have 3D printed plastic scoops, but he changed that. So we have right there, this is a little cap that fits inside this tube. And this tube is this cap. This is your final crimp seat die, among other things. You have a hardened steel sizing ring that has a tapered side and a flush side. You have, sorry, my mistake, that one is the final crimp seater. This is the tool that is intended as a handle for pushing on the punches with your hand, but I use it as a decapping anvil. So when I'm knocking out the old primer, I do it on this. When I'm finishing the crimp, I use it with this. But you'll see that when we get there. Let's continue setting things aside. We've got our crimp starter, which I recommend marking one side with a paint pen. It's got 8-fold crimp on one side and 6-fold on the other. And hopefully I showed that in the correct order. And then you have this tube itself, which is a functional tool used for these sizing operations. Next, so you can see it, there is a punch used for flaring and also for seating the primer. You've got a decapping punch with a hardened steel pin. Both the pin and the sizing ring appear to be nitrited. They're very smooth, really nice finish quality actually. No obvious laser tooling marks. And then in this cavity, you've got 3 Lee manufactured powder scoops, which I'm going to put back in there, and a funnel, which is for filling, and also if you want to use it for working the flare open wider, you can do so. Hopefully I've got that in frame. And so each tool has a purpose. There's nothing really extra in there, and James has his instructions for how to use these. I do things a little differently, so I will show my way. So next up, I'm going to get a lot of this out of the way and show how I use this now if I want to use it to load the slugs. These are also ones that James had sent me from Reloaders Network. I bought the mold and he threw in a lot of extras, which was very generous of him. So here is the slug powder coated. Here's naked. This is on its proprietary tail wad that snaps into it, and this is with the so-called universal base pin. They come out to slightly different weights. Here are some Federal 12S4 wads that I have cut the pedals off. The 12S3 are otherwise the same, but they're, I believe, 1/10 of an inch taller. Maybe it was 1/8. I forget how they worked that out, but the point is, well, this one is a little more stout. Actually, this one is a generic equivalent, but I have the legitimate ones. The point is, this one is a little softer, this one is a little heavier, and it's a little shorter. While I don't want to encourage substitution in load data, in a general sense, a lot of the Shotshell wads from Winchester and from Federal are the same design but longer or shorter leg and different size of shot cups. So if you exercise caution and perhaps send something into the pressure test, you can fill up more or less space as needed in your wad, or I mean in your shell, to achieve a good crimp. So that's exactly what I did to figure out what the right crimp is for this load. The load I'm going to do is not a published load, but I am reasonably confident this one will be safe. I'm not going to give the full data in this video until at least after I have personally tested it out for safety, but I will show you my process. You may end up finding a similar safe load with a different powder. You might use a BPS double-ended gas steel, or one of the ones made by Gualandi are particularly appealing. But I'm just showing you one thing you can do so you can make good ammo regardless of what is currently available on the market. Alright, so I'm going to pause and change my setup here. Alright, let's give you a quick rundown of my load. This is definitely not a published load. It's derived from one out of Lyman's Fifth that is intended for 3-inch holes of the Federal Gold Medal variety. I am not using those holes. I have the new Federal Universal Bulk Pack holes that have the plastic wad. These are similar interior geometry. They are not the same hole. Again, I am not in any way saying this is safe. I'm using the 3.0
disclosed scoop.
Blue Dot is a slow powder. It definitely needs a hot primer to activate it, and the data calls for Federal 209A, which is the hottest non-magnum primer. This is one of those loads that borderline ought to be a magnum primer, so I would definitely caution against substituting for a milder primer. Next, I'm going to do the same load with two different shot stacks. One is a cut down Federal 12S4. I've taken the pedals off of it, and I've set the Svarog Paradox slug powder coated with a universal core pin in it, which makes it roughly a 1 1/3 ounce projectile. That comes to the same stack height as this one, which is the Gualandi Brennicky style tail that snaps into the same slug with its special core pin. Obviously, those are all available from the Reloaders Network. and provided to me generously by James. I've left this one naked, so it'll be very obvious to me when I look at them. I've determined that this load fits well within this shell. If I needed to make a little more space, I could have used the Federal Pink 1-2S3. This one happens to be a clone. I got the Gen 1 article out of shop. So now you see my component list. Now let's see the process of loading these slugs into the shell. I didn't want to duplicate Fortune Cookie's video, that's why I'm doing slug instead of a basic shot load or buckshot or something like that. I thought I'd keep on the Reloaders Network theme because I really appreciate the project that James is running, making the Reloaders Network exist. So I've also got this all set up on a TV dinner stand with a big slick or slab of nylon. Really, this all works better if you have a solid base like an anvil or a really stout workbench. But I'm showing how it can be done, so probably this will all be bouncy and shot. Alright, I'll try to reset so I can work around the camera, and hopefully that will be smooth. I'm going to remove a few of these things off the table that I'm hammering on because they will probably fall on the floor if I do that. So I actually like to have a workflow from left to right and containers for all the things. And I'm not going to be trying to be efficient in this video. I'm just going to show how it works. Obviously, I have the presses for efficiency. If I wanted to get the max speed out of it, I would not be using this kit. I'm merely showing that it's fun that you can have a kit that can do that. So, step one, according to my way of doing this process, which is a little different from James, I have a paper towel with a little bit of lubricant on it. In this case, it is... oh crud, I can't even think of the name of it. It's an oil additive that's very slippery. Next, I slip on this ring, and I slip it bevel side down for these cases because otherwise it will hang up on them. Next, I grab this tube. So I've got that there. I slide that down. I'm going to give it about 3 or 4 solid whacks till I feel it be flush. And it looks like I got it in 2. I have this handy because it works usefully for this. And right now I'm going to drive out the primer and knock off the ring in one operation. If I had gone... so now you see the primer is out. One good whack does it. Set that off to the side. But you can see, hopefully, try to solve the glare problem I've got going on there. There we go. So you can see that there's a little bit of a step in the brass, and that's because I have this with the bevel side down. Some brass you can get away with doing this in one step. This one will catch on it. So now I'm going to give that another good whack till that's seated all the way down flush, like so. So I'll give it another whack just to be safe. There we go. Now I'm confident that's home. You can see that it's flush on this side and a little bit proud on that side. I could probably give it even one more. Actual brass headed as opposed to the usual steel case head would be smoother, such as a Winchester AA-12, a Remington STS, a Federal Gold Medal. Those are the most common quality hulls that have actual brass heads. It's not really an important thing, it's just smoothness. Anyway, now you can see the step is gone, hopefully. There's a little bit of a shiny spot where it was, but this will now fit in every shotgun. You could omit sizing the steel or the brass case head. Most manuals will say that you may as well. I thoroughly disagree. I have seen shot shells hang up in shotguns when people skipped that step. I've seen factory ones that had improperly sized case heads hang up in shotguns. I want reliability. I'm going to go to all the trouble to make my own ammo. Why would I make crappy ammo? No, thank you, please. Alright, so now we don't have a primer and we need one. So I will pick one out of there, set it on my hard but not steel surface and press it down. At this point, I'm going to grab out this punch and originally James's intention is that you use this to help you push on the punch, which actually works pretty well. So you can do that, or you can tap it with the hammer. I usually tap it with the hammer. That is smooth and safe, and you don't have impact, so it's got some merit to it. Now next, I've got it primed now. I need a funnel to flare this out and to add powder. So I'm going to bring that into shot here. Hopefully it's a little bit crowded, but hopefully this is clear enough. And the method recommended by Lee for best precision is this. Plunge it down, pull it up flat, swipe it off, dump it in. And I've done a few tests and measured it, and this load is within the load range I want pretty consistently. I think a proper powder measure is a little bit more consistent than the scoops, but it's within the tolerance of what most charge bars do on a lot of shotgun presses, and certainly commercial ammo is measured volumetrically like this, so you're getting an equivalent experience. I'm going to give this a good push and wiggle so that that's nice and flared, because I don't like to cut up this seal that's on the base of these. They're actually kind of delicate. So I wobble that in, and while it's still kind of in the top, I also push this in one step. Then I can use this punch again to seat it down nice and firm. I just give that a shove. I don't find I need the handle to give me any extra help. And now it is time for the Crimp Starter. I'm going to make sure I get the right side. So I'm using the 8 count, which I believe newer versions of this, he actually puts the markings into the printing so it's easy to distinguish. But I'm a beta tester, and my version didn't have that feature yet. So, see how my crimp is. This is about what the books recommend. I would say if it isn't tight on this pin, you should give your pre-crimp more pre-crimp. I've done a lot of shotshell reloading, and that's one of the most significant things that affects the quality of your crimp. That's what we want to see. I cannot fit that rod in there without opening that up. We're going to get a good load there. And when I'm looking at this, with this particular load, it's marginal as to whether I would actually prefer a slightly taller slug. But I tested this out and it comes out well. So now our next step is we're going to need to do the final crimp, which is this guy, the taller one. Put that on there, give it a shove by hand, and then trying to be good and even. So it helps if you have your handle level when you finish and then come up. And you go till it feels bottomed out and give it a little twist. And if you see this is just slightly collapsed in, but it has a nice lock-in ring, I'd actually rather have that than one that wants to poke out. So I'm going to stick with these 1-2S4 wads instead of the 1-2S3, but you could definitely make this load work either way. Now we're going to just do one more with the whole same method, but using one of these. So from beginning, grab the hole, slap the ring, grab the tube, whack the tube, decapitate it, dump the cap. I'm going to flip the ring, whack it with the tube again. Till it is nice and solid and home. Notice I want to move my primers off the table I'm banging on so they don't bounce everywhere. Now I'm going to knock this out again. Ring is off. I need a new primer. Grab the primer, grab the primer punch. handle for that. Push firmly, feel that it's flush. It is. Funnel. Let's leave that funnel in there. Push that off to the side a little bit. Alright. I apologize for the glare. It's just taking me forever to reset this. So scoop in, swipe off, dump in. Plunge. And then give that a good wobble while pushing down, so I have a nice generous flare, and I kind of rotate that around as it goes in so it doesn't catch on there and tear up the actual gas seal. That push in, pre-crimp. You can kind of feel the bounce of the hammer when it's home. You shouldn't use force, you should use the weight of the hammer for repeatable. An even heavier hammer might be just right actually for this, but that's the one I've got. Final crimp, push till I feel it collapse, then same deal. Yep, third one was enough, fourth one was just verifying. And there we go. That one is again a little bit collapsed in, but that will hold its shape and feed well, and I trust that to be a more consistent crimp than one that is proud. I could use a charge weight with a few more grains or a slightly bulkier powder, or trim the hole a little bit. There's several ways I could get that dead on, but this will actually shoot pretty well, and it won't come apart in storage as you would with a lot of the loadings that are a little bit proud and convex. So that's actually a pretty good hull. That will shoot well. And if I look at it from the outside, I can see that it's a slug. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but I can see that silver in there. Anyway, this is Gun Fun ZS, and check this out on the Reloaders Network. If you want to do things more efficiently for slugs, I would usually recommend a machine something like this. Kind of any of the single stage ones are a really handy machine. I really like the collet sizing systems, but I wouldn't get one that does not have a way to size the brass. You will regret it every time. So that, I would say, it's pretty easy to do, a couple hundred an hour at least. If you're doing it with this, if you look at the channel 314299, you'll see it's about 100 an hour is a pretty reasonable estimate. He did a bunch of time trials with Lee loaders and similar, and I would say this is a comparable enough system that it's about the same. The real way, if you want to get a lot of speed, is to do all similar steps to a whole bunch of holes instead of load them from beginning to end. So in the case of this setup, I would try to size in one pass all the shells you're going to do, and decap in one pass all the shells you're going to do. Then reprime them, funnel them, dump the powder for everything, and place the slug for everything. So I do step 1, do everything decapped and sized. Step 2, reprime, powder, payload, set it aside. And step 3, do all the crimps in one batch. And if you do your big batch like that, I think you could hit pretty decent efficiency. Anyway, GunFunZS out, and let me know what you think. If you have questions or suggestions, please by all means comment, and if you think I'm stupid or I should have done a better job setting up the camera so I'm not directly into the sun as it's setting, well, I agree with you. But you can tell me I'm an idiot. I certainly look like one. Anyway, have a good day. Bye.